Before we begin this story of the desert wind and the two souls it brought together, I want to invite you to join our community. If you love tales of courage, redemption, and love forged in the hardest places, hit that subscribe button. This is a journey worth taking together, and I promise you, this story will stay with you long after the final word. Now, let's step into Silver Creek in 1885, where the wind carried more than just dust. The desert wind carried stories across Silver Creek like a gambler's deck. It shuffled them, dealt them, and watched them land wherever they would. And most of those stories had one name written in the dust: Eddie Ochoa. People called him half-Apache when they thought he couldn't hear. They said it quick, like spitting out something bitter, then turned back to their business as if they'd only mentioned the price of grain. Eddie lived where civilization gave up and the wild took over. Out past the last respectable homestead, where the land turned hard, and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose like broken teeth against the sky, his ranch sat alone. The nearest neighbor was a full day's ride through canyon country that had swallowed better men than most. A man could stand on Eddie's porch and see nothing but emptiness in every direction, just the way the town liked it. Eddie was 35 years old. His mother had been Apache, from the band that once moved freely through these mountains before the government decided where they belonged. His father had been Spanish, a vaquero who taught Eddie to work cattle before fever took him, when Eddie was barely tall enough to hold a rope. Eddie grew up caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. The Apache saw his Spanish blood. The Spanish saw his Apache face. The white settlers saw both and wanted nothing to do with either. But Eddie learned the land the way a monk learns prayer. He read the sky like it was written. Scripture knew when rain would come 3 days before the first cloud appeared. He watched the grass like it whispered secrets. He could track a stray calf through rock and sand by a single bent stem and a shadow in the dust that most men would ride right past. He moved through the desert like he was part of it, quiet and sure and dangerous when he needed to be. The town of Silver Creek had endless theories about Eddie Ochoa. Some swore he'd found Apache gold hidden in the caves on his land, claimed that's how he kept the ranch running when other men went bankrupt. Others whispered that he guided fugitives through the mountains for money that never saw the light of day, that he knew passages through the canyons that didn't appear on any map. Old men in the saloon said his land was cursed, that his Apache mother had called down spirits that still walked the property at night, waiting for revenge on the settlers who'd taken everything. But the thing that made people lean in close, the thing that made Mrs. Henderson's voice drop to a scandalized whisper in the general store, the thing that turned Eddie Ochoa from a subject of speculation into a source of entertainment. It wasn't the gold or the ghosts or even his mixed blood. It was his wives. 3 of them. Mrs. Henderson announced it like she was reading charges at a hanging. 3 mail-order brides in 3 years, she'd say, her voice sharp with righteous judgment, and not one of them lasted more than 7 days. Everyone knew the stories. They'd been told and retold until they'd taken on the weight of legend. Beatrice from Pennsylvania arrived in spring with 3 trunks full of fine dresses and dreams of taming the wilderness. She lasted 4 days. On the 4th night, coyotes sang in the hills, and she screamed until her voice gave out. By dawn, she was packed and demanding to be taken back to town, sobbing that she'd rather die in poverty back east than spend another night in that God-forsaken place. Catherine from Ohio came next, a school teacher who thought she could bring civilization to the desert. She lasted 6 days. The silence broke her, the vast, empty quiet that pressed in from all sides. She told the stagecoach driver that the silence felt like drowning, that she could hear her own thoughts too loud, that she'd go mad if she stayed another hour. Then there was Emma from Boston, with her silk curtains and China tea service and plans to refine Eddie's rough edges. She lasted 8 days longer than the others, which gave the town hope that maybe, finally, someone would stay. But on the 8th morning, Emma found Naish's medicine pouch hanging on the wall, the one Eddie kept from his first wife, his real wife, the Apache woman who'd been killed in a raid 10 years before. Emma called it heathen witchcraft, threw it in the dirt, and demanded Eddie choose between civilization and savagery. Eddie loaded her and her piano onto the wagon without a word. His face never changed, but his eyes were cold enough to freeze water in July. They said Emma cried the whole ride back to Silver Creek, but Eddie never looked back once. After that, the marriage agency in Denver sent Eddie a letter. It was polite but firm. Perhaps he should reconsider his circumstances, before requesting another bride. The town laughed about that for weeks. Even the agency had given up on Eddie Ochoa. And this is where most stories about Eddie Ochoa would end, with a man too cursed or too stubborn or too broken to ever find companionship. But loneliness has a way of making even the wisest man reckless. And grief. Grief makes a man willing to gamble everything on one last hope. Which is exactly what Eddie did on an October morning, when the wind carried the smell of winter down from the mountains. He rode into Silver Creek with his jaw set and his hat pulled low, and Mrs. Henderson, watching from her store window like she always did, saw something she hadn't seen in years. Eddie had shaved. It wasn't much, just a man cleaning himself up before going to the post office. But in Silver Creek, where Eddie Ochoa was concerned, even the smallest gesture meant something. Inside the post office, Jeremiah Hollis paused with his hand on a stack of letters. "Morning, Eddie," he said, careful and cautious the way everyone in town spoke to Eddie, like they were addressing a half-tamed wolf. "Jeremiah." Eddie's voice was low, roughened by too much silence and not enough use. Spanish and something older wove through his accent. "Any mail for me?" Jeremiah's eyes flicked to a single envelope set aside like it had been waiting. "That depends," he said slowly. "You still writing to those agencies?" Eddie's hand extended, patient and unmovable as stone. "That's my business." The letter. Jeremiah sighed the way a man does when he knows he's fighting a losing battle. He handed over the envelope. "From Kansas City this time, Missouri." Eddie didn't open it there. He wasn't the kind of man to reveal himself in public spaces where vultures watched for weakness. He slid the letter into his coat and turned to leave. "Eddie." Jeremiah's voice stopped him at the door, softer now, almost concerned. "We've known each other since we were boys. Maybe it's time to accept that some men are meant to live alone." Eddie stopped. For a long moment, he stood with his back to Jeremiah, one hand on the doorframe. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet as a prayer, and twice as desperate. "You ever watch a wolf circle a campfire, Jeremiah? It knows the fire might burn. But the cold and the dark out there," he gestured toward the vast emptiness beyond the town, "that's certain death. Sometimes a man takes his chances with the burning." Then he was gone, leaving Jeremiah standing alone with the weight of those words. Eddie waited until the town was miles behind him before he pulled out the letter. His horse walked steady beneath him, picking its way through the red rock country that led home. The envelope felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. He broke the seal. The handwriting was careful, educated, but firm, like the writer had learned precision through practice rather than privilege. "My name is Aleya Tan. I am 28 years old. I worked in my father's merchant business in San Francisco until circumstances required me to seek a new beginning. I have read your advertisement and your subsequent letters to the agency. You write of isolation and silence as if they are trials to be endured. I have lived surrounded by thousands of people and still found loneliness. I do not fear empty spaces or silent nights. What I fear is a meaningless existence. You ask for honesty, so I will give it. I am not looking for romance or rescue. I am looking for work, for purpose, for a place where my past does not define my future and my labor determines my worth. If you are still seeking a wife who will not flee at the first hardship or the first silence, I am willing to try. But know this, I will not be decorative. I will not be useless. I will not pretend your heritage is something to overcome rather than something to honor. If these terms are acceptable, write back. If not, I wish you well in your search. Aleya Tan." Eddie read it twice, then a third time. No flowery promises about bringing light to his dark life. No romantic notions about taming the wild frontier. No mention of love at all, just work, honesty, and a woman who talked about his Apache blood like it was fact rather than flaw. He almost didn't believe it was real. That night, by lamplight in the house that still carried echoes of Naisha's presence, Eddie wrote back. His hand was rougher than Aleya's, his words more blunt, but he matched her honesty with his own brutal truth. He told her about winters that could kill a person in hours if they weren't prepared. About the nearest neighbor being a day's hard ride through country that broke wagons and horses alike. About the town that would judge her for choosing him. About his Apache mother and the traditions he still kept. About the ranch hands who came and went with the seasons. About the work that never ended. About the silence that pressed in like a physical weight. He almost wrote about Naisha. About the wife who'd understood silence like it was a language. about the raid and the guilt and the grief that still lived in every corner of the house. But the memory cut too close to bone, so he left that wound unopened for now. Instead, he wrote one sentence that felt like laying his heart on the table for a stranger to judge. 3 women have come here as brides and left as strangers. Perhaps the fault is mine. But if you are willing to risk it, I offer you hard work, honest partnership, and a life that matters because it is built on truth rather than comfortable lies. When he sealed the letter, coyotes were singing in the canyon the same sound that had broken Beatrice's nerve. Eddie stepped onto his porch and looked up at the stars scattered across the black sky like thrown dice. Somewhere, Aleya Tan might be looking at those same stars even if city smoke dimmed them. Eddie let himself hold one fragile thread of hope. Maybe this time would be different. 2 weeks before winter truly arrived, a telegram came to Silver Creek. 5 words that would change everything. Arriving November 15th, no fanfare, AT. Eddie Ochoa stood at the depot on a gray November morning, watching dust rise on the road. The stagecoach appeared through the haze, wheels clattering, horses blowing hard. Passengers descended one by one. A merchant, a rancher's wife, 2 cowboys looking for work. Then she appeared. She didn't wait for help. She gripped the door frame with gloved hands and stepped down herself, one worn leather bag in hand, modest trunk following behind. Her dress was plain, practical calico, faded from too many washings but kept neat and clean. Her hair was pulled back in tight blonde braids, not a strand out of place despite the dusty journey. And her eyes were blue and sharp and steady, the kind of eyes that had seen hard things and refused to look away. Those eyes found Eddie immediately, and something in them recognized him, the way prey recognizes a predator or the way one survivor recognizes another. Eddie removed his hat. Miss Tan, Mr. Ochoa. No smile, no fear, just calm assessment. She looked him up and down the same way he was measuring her. You're taller than I expected. Most folks say that. He reached for her trunk. May I? She lifted her bag higher, protective. This one stays with me. Personal things. You can take the other. Eddie nodded once, respecting the boundary. My wagon's there. We've got a long ride before dark. I expected as much. Aleya Tan followed him without hesitation, while the whole town of Silver Creek watched like they were waiting for the show to begin, waiting for her to scream, to cry, to realize her mistake. But Aleya Tan didn't even glance back. The wagon rolled out of Silver Creek, with the town's eyes burning holes in their backs. Mrs. Henderson stood near her store like a sentinel, pretending she was only watching the weather. Other faces appeared in windows judging, whispering, already placing bets on how long this one would last. But up in that wagon, Aleya Tan sat with her back straight and her bag held close. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't a complaint or a question about comfort. She asked something no mail-order bride had ever asked Eddie Ochoa before. How long since the last rain? Eddie's hands tightened on the reins. He glanced at this strange woman beside him, this widow from San Francisco with secrets in her eyes and steel in her spine. 6 weeks, he answered. Maybe 7. Aleya nodded, looking at the brittle grass beside the road like she was reading a message there. It shows. And Eddie Ochoa, who hadn't let himself hope for anything in 10 long years, felt something dangerous kindle in his chest. The notorious 7 days were coming. But this woman didn't look like she'd ever run from anything in her life. And this is where our story truly begins. With 2 people carrying wounds they've never shown anyone, gambling everything on 7 days that have destroyed every attempt that came before. Will Aleya Tan survive what broke 3 other women? Will Eddie Ochoa finally find someone who sees past the blood and the grief to the man underneath? And what happens when the secrets they're both hiding come to light? If you're invested in finding out, I want you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me if you think Aleya will make it past day 7. And subscribe, because this story gets more intense, more passionate, and more heartbreaking before it gets better. And I promise you, you won't want to miss a single moment. Now, let's find out what happens when the wagon carrying Eddie Ochoa and Aleya Tan finally reaches the ranch at the edge of the world. Eddie Ochoa lived in a house decorated by a dead woman. 10 years, and he still hadn't moved Naiche's woven blanket from the chair or touched the clay pots she'd shaped. The dried sage bundles hung from the rafters, filling the rooms with her ghost every time the wind made them sway. He'd been away selling cattle when the raid came. They took everything worth taking and burned the rest. Nisha had been 6 months pregnant, alone because Eddie insisted on making the sale himself. He came back to ashes and blood and silence so complete it swallowed sound. The Apache blamed him for leaving her unprotected. The Spanish blamed him for marrying Apache. The white settlers barely acknowledged it happened, just another dead Indian. Eddie blamed himself for breathing when she didn't. The brides were a mistake from the start. Grief makes a man cruel without meaning to be. He tested them, watched them fail, almost wanted them to, because if they couldn't survive 7 days, then he was right. He was meant to be alone. Beatrice lasted 4 days before the coyotes broke her. Catherine made it to 6 before the silence drove her mad. Emma threw Nietzsche's medicine pouch in the dirt and demanded Eddie choose between civilization and savagery. He loaded her onto the wagon without a word, something inside him hardening to stone. After Emma, the town stopped pretending to pity him. Mrs. Henderson made sure everyone knew about the Denver agency's rejection letter. Children threw rocks when he rode past. The general store refused his business unless he paid double cash up front. Eddie should have stopped, but loneliness is a peculiar kind of torture. When Aleya Tan's letter arrived, he almost threw it away unopened. But something made him break the seal. Maybe desperation. Maybe the last ember of hope he couldn't extinguish. Her words hit him like cold water. I am not looking for romance or rescue. I am looking for work. No poetry about love conquering all. Just questions about water rights, grazing capacity, winter preparations, practical concerns of someone who understood survival came before sentiment. Eddie read it 3 times, searching for the lie, found nothing but brutal honesty. He wrote back that night, sitting at Nietzsche's table, lamplight throwing shadows that looked too much like her ghost. He told Aleya the truth about isolation, danger, the prejudice she'd face. Told her about his Apache blood like a warning, then added one final sentence. 3 women have come here as brides and left as strangers. Perhaps the fault is mine. He sealed it before he could take it back. Outside, coyotes sang the same song that broke Beatrice's nerve. Eddie placed Nietzsche's medicine pouch on the mantel, fingers lingering on worn leather. Let this be the last time, he said to the empty room, to the ghost, to himself. Let this be the last time I hope for something I don't deserve. The sage swayed. Nietzsche's memory flickered in lamplight like a blessing or a curse. Eddie had never been sure which. And somewhere, 2 weeks away by stagecoach, Aleya Tan read his letter and made a decision that would break the pattern or break them both. The stagecoach rattled into Silver Creek, trailing dust like a funeral shroud. Aleya Tan stepped down before the driver could offer his hand. One worn leather bag gripped tight, her calico dress neat despite the journey. The town descended like carrion birds. Mrs. Henderson materialized first. My dear, are you certain? That man up at the ranch, 3 wives have tried and failed. Aleya's face remained smooth as glass. Thank you for your concern. She'd perfected this expression in San Francisco when creditors circled. Blank, unreadable, safe. The sheriff tipped his hat with pity. Men near the saloon whispered crude jokes. Aleya heard every word, kept walking toward the depot, where a tall man waited like a storm about to break. Eddie Ochoa was harder than his letters suggested. Broader, more weathered. His eyes assessed her like a puzzle already decided unsolvable. Miss Tan, he removed his hat. Mr. Ochoa, she met his stare. You're taller than I expected. Most folks say that. He reached for her trunk. May I? Her hand tightened on her bag. This one stays with me. You can take the other. He nodded once. The entire town watched them leave. The wagon rolled through landscape that should have terrified her. Red rock canyons, endless scrubland, mountains sharp enough to cut sky. Instead, Aleya cataloged it like inventory. How long since the last rain? Eddie's hands tightened on the reins. 6 weeks, maybe 7. It shows. She pointed at brittle grass, calculating yield and loss. What predators? Mountain lions, coyotes, rattlesnakes. He waited for fear that didn't come. Nearest neighbor? The Morales family, days ride east. Eddie had expected screaming or tears. Instead, this widow asked ranchers questions like she was preparing for an exam. The ranch house appeared as sun touched the mountains, small, solid, built to survive. Aleya studied it with a merchant's eye. Good bones, poor maintenance, potential. Inside, Nietzsche's presence lived everywhere. Woven blankets, clay pots, dried sage. Aleya moved through the rooms, touching things with careful respect. When she found the medicine pouch on the mantel, she paused. Your first wife's? Eddie's throat tightened. Yes. She lifted it gently, examining the beadwork. It's beautiful. May I learn about the herbs inside? Every other bride had recoiled. This woman asked to learn. Eddie felt something crack in his chest, small, dangerous. What's the real work here? Eddie gestured at the chaos, unorganized supplies, stacked papers, everything. She found his account books within an hour. You're being cheated by at least 3 merchants in town. Eddie bristled. How would you know? My father was a merchant. I learned young. The lie of omission tasted bitter. She didn't mention her husband, the gambling debts, the bills signed in her name. By nightfall, Aleya had reorganized 6 months of accounts. Eddie watched from the doorway as she worked by lamplight, blonde braids coming loose, fingers stained with ink. Why did you really come here? The question he'd asked all the others. Aleya looked up. The truth sat on her tongue, the suicide, the debts, the collectors. But she gave him what she could. Because I needed to go somewhere, my past couldn't follow me. And you needed someone who wouldn't run from yours. It was the truth, just not all of it. Eddie held her gaze, seeing shadows that matched his own. Fair enough. Outside, coyotes sang. Inside, 2 people carrying secrets sat in Nietzsche's house and wondered if honesty measured in halves could ever build something whole. Day 1 complete, 6 more to go. Eddie woke to coffee. For a moment he thought Nietzsche had returned. Then reality settled. 3 days since Aleya arrived, and she rose before him every morning like work was prayer. He found her mending fence posts, hands blistered, dress dirt-stained, no complaint. Just relentless work transforming chaos into order. You don't have to. I know. Aleya drove another nail home, but it needs doing. Eddie had waited for complaints. Instead, Aleya attacked neglect like a personal enemy. By noon, she'd reorganized the barn, cataloged supplies, started a list of needs versus affordability. Your trade agreements are terrible, she announced over lunch. Henderson's charging double. Miller's rates are robbery. Eddie's jaw tightened. They don't trade fair with men like me. Then we don't trade with them. Her eyes went calculating, merchant's daughter surfacing. The Morales family, we ride today. You don't ask permission much. Would you give it if I asked? Aleya met his stare. Or would you protect me from useful work? The barb landed. Eddie saddled the horses. Elena Morales greeted them with warm suspicion she'd heard about cursed brides. But Aleya didn't play delicate. She laid out numbers, trade routes, mutual benefit with San Francisco precision. Elena's eyebrows rose with each proposal. They struck a deal, saving Eddie money and giving the Morales family better markets. Elena pulled Aleya aside. That man carries ghosts. Don't let them consume you. I carry my own ghost, Senora. Maybe that's why I understand his. Riding home, Eddie caught himself almost smiling, first genuine pleasure in years. Day 3 brought rain. They worked in the barn while water drummed the roof. Aleya found Nietzsche's medicine pouch, held it reverently. Teach me. Eddie's throat closed. Emma had thrown this pouch in dirt, but Aleya looked at it like wisdom worth learning. He opened the leather slowly, hands shaking. Sage for cleansing, yerba santa for breath, osha root for protection. Each herb carried Nietzsche's memory, her hands gathering, her voice teaching. Aleya took notes, asked questions that showed real listening. When Eddie's voice broke on memory, she didn't offer empty comfort, just waited, present and patient. Later, she mended his shirt using Apache-style stitching from a book she'd studied. The gesture cracked Eddie's carefully maintained walls. Library in San Francisco, she explained. Seemed respectful to know something before arriving. Show me where Nietzsche gathered herbs. I should know the land. They rode to the spring as sunset painted the canyon gold. Eddie showed her the hidden place where plants grew thick. His hand brushed Aleya's, pointing to wild tobacco. Neither pulled away immediately. That night, Eddie counted days. 3. Longer than Beatrice. Aleya moved through the house, touching Nietzsche's things with respect, organizing chaos, making the space function like home instead of shrine. He watched her by lamplight, ink-stained and exhausted, still working on accounts. Hope bloomed in his chest, small, fragile, dangerous. In San Francisco, Cyrus Winters slammed a photograph on a detective's desk. Aleya in her wedding dress, smiling beside his brother. Find her, Cyrus said, voice cold with rage. Find the woman who destroyed my brother and bring her back to face what she's done. The tracker pocketed the photograph and money. How far should I look? As far as it takes, she's running, but nobody runs forever. Day 3 complete, 4 days to go. Day 4 dawned wrong. The air pressed heavy, electric. Dark clouds built over the mountains. Horses stamped nervous. Eddie's gut knew flash flood coming. We have maybe 3 hours to move the herd. He was already saddling when Aleya appeared, dressed for hard riding. Show me which one's mine. Her hands fumbled with the Saddle City hands, but she didn't ask for help. Mounted awkwardly, set her jaw like heading into battle. The cattle sensed the storm, scattered, panicked. Eddie and Aleya drove them back, voices raw from shouting. Sky darkened. Wind came, then rain like bullets. They reached the stream as it started rising. Eddie went first. Aleya followed. Halfway across, her horse stumbled. She went under. Eddie's heart stopped. She surfaced, gasping, bleeding from her forehead, grabbed her horse's reins, dragged herself back into the saddle soaking, blood mixing with rain, kept moving. They pushed the last cattle to high ground as flood roared through the canyon below a wall of water that would have killed everything. Aleya slumped in her saddle, shaking, blood streaming. Eddie expected tears, breakdown. Instead, at the ranch, Aleya slid off her horse and started securing shutters. Hands bleeding, dress torn. Checking supplies, moving things from leaks, sheltering horses. Eddie caught her arm. You're hurt. It can wait. The storm can't. They worked in synchronized silence as rain became deluge. When they finished, night had fallen, and the world was nothing but water and wind. Inside, they collapsed by the fire. Aleya's braids hung in wet ropes. The gash on her forehead would scar. Eddie handed her whiskey. You should have stayed at the house. Would Nisha have stayed? Aleya's eyes challenged. The comparison hit like a fist. No. Then neither do I. Storm battered the walls. In forced intimacy, words came easier. My father's merchant house in San Francisco, Aleya began, voice careful. He taught me to read people, spot bad deals, negotiate when everything seemed lost. He died when I was 20. I tried to keep it running. She didn't mention the husband who married her for that business. The gambling, the debts, the way she'd watched everything crumble because she trusted the wrong man. Did you succeed? Eddie asked. No, sometimes trying isn't enough. Eddie stared into flames, seeing Nisha's face. I met her at a trading post. She laughed when I tried to haggle, said I had the soul of a merchant and the face of a fool. His voice cracked. We had 5 years. She was carrying our child when the raid came. Aleya waited, silent. I wasn't there. The confession tore out like glass. Selling cattle 3 days away. Came back to ashes. They killed her because I left her alone. You couldn't have known. I should have been there. Eddie's hands clenched. Should have died with her instead of living like this. Aleya reached across, placed her hand over his scarred knuckles. She wouldn't want you dead. She'd want you living. There's a difference. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, 2 damaged people sat with partial truths, survivor's guilt, desperate hope that broken pieces could fit together. Day 5 complete. Later, in darkness, Aleya lay awake counting. Tomorrow was day 6, Catherine's record, the woman who lasted longest. I'm not leaving, she whispered to the darkness, to Eddie sleeping beyond the wall, to herself. Whatever it takes, I'm not leaving. But she didn't know if it was a promise or a prayer. 2 more days to go. Day 6 dawned on a world remade by water. Trees down, fences destroyed, mud everywhere. Eddie and Aleya worked clearing debris, checking animals for injury. They found the calf trapped under a fallen beam, bleeding weak. Eddie lifted the wood while Aleya crawled underneath, cradling the animal like glass. Its leg bent wrong. Easy, she whispered, voice soft as prayer. We've got you. Eddie splinted the leg while Aleya held steady, murmuring comfort in a tone he'd never heard gentle beneath the steel. When they finished, she stayed in the mud, stroking the animal's head until it calmed. Something shifted in Eddie watching her. This woman who'd fallen in a flood and gotten back up bleeding, who held a dying animal with infinite tenderness. You're still here. The words came rough. Aleya looked up, covered in mud. Did you expect different? Everyone always leaves on day 6 or 7. I'm not everyone, Eddie. She'd used his name for the first time. Not a curse, just a fact. That afternoon, Miguel Morales arrived, surveyed the damage, watched them work. They moved like 2 parts of one machine. Aleya handing tools before Eddie asked. Eddie steadying boards while she hammered, finishing each other's sentences. Miguel caught Eddie's arm. Hermano, this one is different. Don't let her go. I'm trying not to. Then stop trying and do. Some chances don't come twice. After Miguel left, the sun dropped. Day 7. Eddie found Aleya by the corral, watching the injured calf. 7 days, Eddie said. Aleya's shoulders tensed. I know. We should make it legal if you're staying. She turned, eyes wide. Eddie, I'm not asking for love, I'm asking for partnership. His voice steadied. We work well together. You respect what was here. You don't break. That's more than I thought I'd find. I want to stay. Aleya's voice cracked. But you need to know. Eddie cut her off, gentle but firm. Whatever you're running from, I don't care. We're all running from something. Maybe that's enough honesty for now. Permission to keep her secrets. Aleya felt relief and guilt war in her chest. She should tell him about the suicide, the debts, Cyrus hunting her, but the words stuck, trapped behind fear of losing this. When? She asked. Father Sebastian comes through next week. Then yes. They stood watching sunset paint the mountains. The 7-day curse broken not by romance but by work and respect. 2 damaged people gambling on being less broken together. That night, Aleya lit a candle and wrote to her dead husband. Confessed everything, the unpaid debts, the shame that drove her west, the good man she was lying to. Wrote until tears blurred the ink, then burned it, watching her confession turn to ash. The closest she could come to honesty. 20 miles east, a tracker showed Aleya's wedding photograph to a hotel clerk. Blonde woman, traveling alone, might be calling herself Tan or Winters. The clerk studied the picture. Might have passed through weeks back. Caught a stage heading west. West toward what? Silver Creek. Only thing out that way. The tracker smiled cold, pocketing the photograph and blood money. 20 miles. He'd be there in a day. 7 days complete, the real test just beginning. The week before the wedding, Elena Morales arrived with fabric and determination. She led Aleya to the trunk where Naishi's things waited like prayers. You could wear something new, Elena said carefully. Aleya lifted the traditional dress Apache beadwork flowing across cream fabric. This is what should be worn, if Eddie allows it. Eddie, in the doorway, felt his throat close. Emma had thrown Naishi's things away, but Aleya held the dress like it was sacred. She'd want it worn, Eddie managed, not stored away like shame. Elena and Aleya spent 3 days altering the dress, every stitch respectful. Eddie watched Aleya's hands preserving the beadwork, honoring what Naisha made. Moving forward without erasing the past. Father Sebastian arrived Saturday, dust-covered and kind-eyed. He'd watched Eddie turn into a ghost after the raid. Seeing him now, standing straighter, the priest smiled. The ceremony gathered in Eddie's house. The Morales family, a few cautious neighbors. Aleya stood in Naisha's dress, blonde braids woven with sage, and Eddie couldn't breathe for the rightness of it. Father Sebastian opened his book. Dearly beloved. The door slammed open. Clayton Briggs filled the frame, smile cruel as a knife. Hate to interrupt, but there's a man from San Francisco asking after Aleya Winters, says she's wanted for fraud. The room went silent. Aleya's face drained white. Eddie's hand tightened on hers like iron. Seems your bride's got secrets, Ochoa. This woman, Eddie said, voice quiet and deadly, is Aleya Ochoa. Anyone with business can take it up with both of us. Father Sebastian, reading desperation in Aleya's eyes and steel in Eddie's, spoke quickly. Do you, Eduardo Ochoa, take this woman? I do. And do you, Aleya Tan? I do. Barely a whisper, but real. Miguel Morales stepped forward, hand on his rifle. The Padre's talking. You're leaving. Briggs left. The damage was done. The celebration felt fragile food, music, dancing, all shadowed by truth waiting to break. When the last guest departed, Eddie and Aleya stood in the house that was now legally theirs. Now tell me the whole truth, Eddie said. So Aleya did. All of it. The merchant's daughter who married a charming gambler. The debts mounting like corpses. Her husband's name on contracts she never signed. The night he put a gun to his head rather than face what he'd done. The brother-in-law who blamed her, who hired men to drag her back. I'm not running from debt, she finished, raw. I'm running from a man who wants me to pay for sins that weren't mine but got written in my name anyway. Eddie stood silent so long, Aleya's heart broke waiting. You should have told me. I know. But I understand why you didn't. He met her eyes. Hurt lived there, but also recognition, 2 people who'd lost everything to circumstances beyond control. We start fresh tomorrow. No more lies. No more lies, Aleya whispered. Eddie didn't embrace her, didn't offer easy forgiveness, just nodded once and walked to his room. Their room now, legally, if not yet in practice. Aleya stood alone in Nietzsche's dress, married but uncertain, protected by law but knowing laws could be broken. She touched the beadwork and made a promise to the woman who'd worn it first. I'll fight for this. Whatever comes, I'll fight. Outside, the tracker knocked on Clayton Briggs's door, and two men who hated Eddie Ochoa began planning his destruction. The wedding was over. The war was just beginning. 2 weeks after the wedding, 3 riders appeared. Eddie recognized trouble before he could see faces. Cyrus Winters dismounted, flanked by the tracker and a San Francisco sheriff. Aleya Winters, Cyrus announced. You're coming back to face fraud charges. Eddie stepped between them and his wife. Didn't speak, just stood solid as mountains. Cyrus's lip curled. Step aside, half-breed. My brother's widow used his name on documents. That's fraud. Her name is Aleya Ochoa, Eddie said quiet. And you'll speak to both of us. Before Cyrus could respond, Aleya stepped forward. Not behind Eddie. Beside him. You want to discuss fraud, Cyrus? Let's discuss it. Her voice cut like glass. Your brother gambled away $18,000. He signed my name to 7 contracts I never saw. And you told creditors the debts were mine to protect the Winters name. Cyrus's face went red. You drove him to... He put a gun to his own head because he couldn't face what he'd done. That's not my sin. Aleya's hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. I'll pay what's legitimately owed. Eddie's ranch is profitable for the first time in years. Monthly payments until the debt is cleared. The San Francisco sheriff looked uncomfortable. The local sheriff, Torres, who'd watched Eddie survive 10 years of grief, interrupted. This is civil, not criminal. We don't extradite for debt. Cyrus had wanted Aleya in chains, but she stood there offering money and dignity he didn't deserve. $200 a month, he spat. Miss one payment and I come back with federal charges. Agreed. They left in dust and rage. Aleya's knees buckled. Eddie caught her. It's not over, she whispered. No, but we survived it together. That evening, Eddie opened the trunk he hadn't touched in 10 years. Naisha's silver jewelry necklaces, bracelets, earrings her grandmother made. The last valuable thing he owned. Eddie, no. Naisha would want this. He held a silver necklace to the light, remembering her wearing it, laughing. She'd want you safe, want us to build something that lasts. He looked at Aleya. This isn't letting go. This is choosing to live. The jewelry paid the first 3 months. Cyrus got his money. Eddie got freedom. Spring came like forgiveness. Aleya expanded the garden corn, beans, and squash in the Apache Three Sisters method. Between rows, she used San Francisco crop rotation, past and present, woven together. The ranch thrived, cattle fattened, accounts showed profit. The Morales family visited often. Even townspeople started trading fair, worn down by the Ochoa's success. One evening, Aleya sat checking accounts when she went very still. Eddie looked up from mending tack. What's wrong? She set down her pen, hands trembling. Met his eyes across lamplight. I think I might be pregnant. The world stopped. Eddie's hands froze. 10 years ago, Naisha had said those words. 10 years ago, he'd lost everything. Are you sure? His voice barely functioned. Not certain, but the signs. Aleya touched her stomach, fear and hope warring. Eddie, He crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt before her chair, placed his hand over hers on her belly, felt the future pressing against his palm like a promise or a threat. We'll face it, he said. Whatever comes, together. But his hands shook, and they both knew why. Elena Morales confirmed it with gentle hands and knowing eyes. 3 months, maybe 4. You're strong. This baby will be strong too. Aleya's joy was uncomplicated. Eddie's was drowning in ghosts. He watched her like she might shatter. Stopped her from lifting water, carrying firewood, mending fences. When she reached for the saddle, he blocked her. No riding, no heavy work, nothing that could. Eddie. Aleya's voice went hard. I'm pregnant, not dying. Naisha was strong too, it didn't save her. 3 days of this. Eddie hovering, forbidding, building a cage from fear. On the 4th morning, Aleya snapped. I am not Naish. You cannot protect me from everything, and I will not live in a cage built from your terror. If you want me here, trust me to know my own body. Eddie's face went stone. He walked out, saddled his horse, rode into the mountains without a word. He rode for hours until he reached the quiet place where stones marked Nayechi's grave. He'd avoided this place for 10 years. Now he knelt in the dust beside the cairn he'd built with bleeding hands. "I'm sorry," he said to the stones, "to memory. Sorry I wasn't here. Sorry I survived when you didn't. Sorry I'm terrified of being happy." The wind moved through the canyon, carrying sage. "There's a woman now, Aleya. She's carrying my child and I'm so scared I can't breathe." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to do this without you." Silence, just wind and stone and sky. Then, soft as a whisper, he heard what Nayechi would have said. "You do it anyway. You love them anyway. Fear is the price of caring. Pay it." When he rode home, something had loosened in his chest. Grief never really goes, but it no longer strangled him. He found Aleya in the garden, planting despite his orders. She looked up, eyes defiant. "I'm sorry." Eddie knelt beside her in the dirt. "You're right. I was building a cage. I was so afraid of losing you, I was crushing what we have." Aleya's hands stilled. "I'm afraid too." "I know." They sat in the garden as night fell, talking like never before. Eddie's terror of losing another child. Aleya's fear of motherhood when her own mother died giving birth to her. The weight of bringing a mixed-blood child into a judging world. "We teach them strength," Aleya said finally. "Teach them about your mother's people and your father's people, about my father's merchant wisdom, about surviving things that should break you." "And we love them," Eddie added, hand finding hers in darkness. "Love them so fiercely they never doubt they belong somewhere, even if the world says they don't. Especially then." Eddie's hand moved to her belly, feeling the barely there flutter of life. "A future, a legacy, a promise. This child will know they're loved," he said. "That's all that matters. And they'll know they come from survivors." Aleya covered his hand with hers. In that moment, both felt the weight lift. They weren't just surviving anymore. The endless running, the grief, the fear. They were building something that would outlast them. They were living. 6 months later, the ranch didn't look like the same place. New corrals stood strong. The garden sprawled green, 3 sisters growing beside San Francisco vegetables, past and present sharing soil. The house had grown too, a new room waiting to cradle the life inside Aleya. She moved carefully now, belly round with promise, but still worked. Eddie had learned not to cage her, though his eyes tracked her movements like prayer. The Morales family visited most Sundays. Even townspeople had started trading fare not from love, but because the Ochoas' success was undeniable. Clayton Briggs had tried once more to cause trouble. Miguel and Eddie had ridden to his ranch together. No violence. Just 2 men making it clear that attacks on one Ochoa meant war with both. Briggs backed down. One evening, as sunset painted the desert gold and purple, Eddie found Aleya in the doorway, one hand on her belly, watching the mountains turn soft. He joined her, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, felt her leaning into him. They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that took months to earn. "Do you ever think about the woman you were when you wrote that first letter?" Aleya asked. Eddie considered. "Different, broken in different ways." "Me too." Aleya's hand moved across her belly. "I thought I was looking for a hiding place." "What did you find?" She turned to look at him, really look at him. "Home, not a place, a person." Eddie's throat tightened. Inside, Naisha's medicine pouch hung beside Aleya's father's old merchant ledger. 2 lives, 2 losses honored equally. The baby kicked hard enough they both felt it. "You know what they'll say in town," Eddie said quiet. "About the child, about us. Let them talk." Aleya's voice was steel wrapped in warmth. "We'll teach this child who they are. That belonging doesn't require anyone's permission." The desert wind blew warm, carrying sage and rain that might come tomorrow. 2 people who'd been running from grief, from debt, from the past, had finally stopped. Not because they'd escaped what they feared, but because they'd found something worth staying for. Some fires burn you alive, others warm you through the coldest night. The trick is knowing which flame to walk into and having the courage to stay even when the heat becomes unbearable. Eddie and Aleya learned that 7 days is just the beginning. Forever is built day by day, scar by scar, truth by truth. They'd survived Cyrus Winters and Clayton Briggs. They'd survived the 7-day curse and 10 years of grief. They'd survived their own fear and guilt, and the lies they'd told themselves about what they deserved. Now they stood in the doorway of their home, the desert wind carrying stories of the half-Apache rancher and the widow who stayed. Behind them, lamplight glowed through windows. Before them, the land stretched vast, and no longer hostile. Just hard, honest, real. The baby kicked again. Aleya laughed, covering Eddie's hand with hers over the place where their future grew. The mountains watched, ancient and patient. Stars began to appear, scattered across darkening sky like promises. And as the last light faded, Eddie Ochoa and Aleya Ochoa, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other's truth, knew one thing with certainty. Some flames are worth every risk,